Hey, this is Edwin Dearborn, another edition of Growth Driven, and I'm super excited to bring on one of my biggest mentors, whether he knew it or not, but I think he knows it, David Meerman Scott, and I'm just going to play my little intro video, and we're going to roll. All right. So I am here with David Meerman Scott. David, thank you so much for being on my show, Growth Driven.
Hey, my pleasure. You know, we've been connected on social media, dare I say, a decade, for a decade. And it's always great when your name pops up on one of my feeds. And I feel it's the funny thing about social, isn't it? You feel like you know somebody. And I feel like I know you, even though this is the first time we've actually had a conversation. So thank you for inviting me on.
Well, thank you for being on here. You know, I'm going to tell you how I first got introduced to you. Back in 2007, 2008, there was a couple of perfect storms happening. The economy was crashing. Facebook and YouTube, Twitter and all that were exploding on the scene. I intuitively knew that this was going to be the future of marketing, but I also knew that I was as blind as a bat. So I went to a business mentor of mine who I really respected. And I said, I better learn this internet or I'm going to become a dodo bird. I said, where do I learn? He goes, oh, you've got to get David Meerman Scott's book, The New Rules of Marketing and PR. I literally went to the bookstore. We actually went to the bookstore. And I bought the book that day. And I think I read it almost every night for a month. In fact, I read it twice.
Wow.
And it really is what got me into the present moment, because I didn't know what the word blog meant or backlink or retweet. You know, I was blind, and your book really is the one that brought me into the moment of where we are now. And then I read Newsjacking, which I absolutely loved. And then I got your two new books, Fanocracy and Standout Virtual Events, which I highly recommend. I just finished both of them last month. So thank you for all the content that you're putting out and the instructions that you're sharing with people.
Oh, hey, my pleasure, Edwin. You know, the New Rules of Marketing and PR book was super interesting because, you know, it was only 13 years ago that book came out, and I actually started writing it about 15 years ago. But it really was a different world back then. You know, at that time, marketers were all about advertising, and everything was about banner ads on the web and interrupting people. And it wasn't until I started to talk about these ideas, and other people had been, you know, talking about the ideas as well. I was just the first person to put out a book that articulated those ideas. And you weren't the only one that got that advice, because as of now, I'm on the 7th edition of the New Rules of Marketing and PR. I update it every 2 years or so because things are constantly changing. There's new tools, there's new ways to communicate. The ideas are always the same. And that is that it's not about interrupting people with advertising. It's about publishing content. It's not about begging the media to write about us, which is traditional PR. Rather, it's about writing about us ourselves, or broadcasting about us ourselves the way you're doing right now, as a matter of fact. And so 7th edition, which is kind of remarkable, because if you think back when you first read the book, which is probably the first edition if you read it in 2007, and now we're in the 7th edition, and I've sold nearly 500,000 copies in English and 29 other languages, from Albanian to Vietnamese, which is remarkable. So we really have gone through a revolution, and I'm just the person who articulated it, but it's people like you who are doing it that's really making a difference. So thank you for engaging with my content way back then, and also for connecting with me on social media, because we've had a number of conversations on social media, and I always enjoy seeing your name pop up in my feeds.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that acknowledgement. What since you've been writing that book, and we'll just stay on the topic of that book for a moment, you've rewritten it 7 years. Where have you seen the biggest changes in those 13 years, the most important changes?
Well, what's really happening is that, of course, we're getting more sophisticated. I mean, that's pretty obvious. But what's really happening is there's always different tools, different ways to communicate. So way back when I was writing the first edition, which I started writing about 2005, and then throughout 2006, and then it came out in 2007. At that time I was writing, Facebook was only for students. I don't. A lot of people don't remember that, but unless you had a .edu email address, you couldn't get onto Facebook in the very early years. Twitter didn't even exist when I was writing the first edition.
Wow.
The most popular social network when the book came out had 24 million members. Do you know who that was? Can you guess? Or maybe you remember? It was MySpace. You're right. Absolutely. MySpace was the largest social network on the planet and only had 24 million users. Today, Facebook has 2 billion users. So the first edition came out, and although the ideas were absolutely relevant, and the ideas have not changed in 13 years over 7 editions, people said to me, excuse me, people said to me, David, haven't you ever heard of Twitter? I mean, I'm using Twitter. I'm like, yeah, I've heard of Twitter. It came out, it came out after I wrote the first edition. So I realized I needed to write a second edition. And then, constantly, then Instagram came out on the scene, and then Google Plus came out on the scene. And by the way, the 7th edition, I had to remove Google Plus because it went away. Right. Vine came in, and then I had to remove Vine when that went away. So, just constantly new social networks popping up on the scene. But the other thing I do throughout the different editions is I'm constantly looking for great stories. I'm looking for great stories of people who have been successful, people who have been able to, use these ideas, not that they learned them from me necessarily, but have used these ideas to do great marketing, great public relations, grow their business as a result. So every time I do a new edition, 7 times now, I'm constantly looking for new great examples. I'm typically removing a dozen or even 2 dozen of the existing examples and putting in a dozen or 2 dozen new ones in, so that it's always fresh and always interesting.
That's great.
And so it's a lot of work every couple of years to update it, but it continues to sell really well. So it's kind of an annuity, and I got to keep updating it.
Yeah. No, that's great that you've got such a piece of pillar content there and you've really taken the time to create it so that it's always evergreen in the moment.
Yeah. And each time it comes out, my publisher, I use Wiley for this particular book. My publisher and I treat it as a brand new book. It has a new ISBN number. It has a new, everything's new about it, and it pops out. So it, each one is like birthing another baby, although they're kind of twins, I guess.
Yeah, totally. And then this one in particular, I found very relevant because obviously with COVID, the lockdown, obviously some states and some cities had it greater than others, but nonetheless, we were all massively affected by it. We went virtual. I went, okay, well, all of a sudden, like the rest of the world, it's like I had to get a new computer. I got a new camera. I got a new microphone. I was like, I really embraced the world, but I needed the knowledge. And your book really, there's a lot more for me to apply. Can you speak to what you've been coaching since March, business leaders about this topic?
Sure. So, like many people like us, who speak at conferences, I went from doing I think I probably did about 30 or 35 in-person events in 2019, did a number of them in early 2020. And my last in-person event was on March 2nd of 2020, and that was at Social Media Marketing World in San Diego. And then every single event, in-person event, was canceled around that early March timeframe. and because of the pandemic, obviously. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? I'm used to speaking nearly every week in some part of the world, and I had events in Italy and Montenegro and Las Vegas and San Francisco and all these other cities booked, and all of them were canceled. I'm like, oh my gosh, what do we do now? Yeah. So it was really interesting. You talked about the new rules of marketing and PR, and how the idea of the new rules of marketing and PR is that when you want to do marketing on the web, it's different than marketing in an offline world. Because in an offline world, you can't create content for free. You've got to somehow publish it, get it out there. Whether that's in a billboard or a magazine ad or a television ad or direct mail or or skywriting or whatever, and it costs money. But as people were thinking about putting their marketing online, and I'm talking way back in the early 2000s when I was starting to write about these ideas, everyone was thinking about marketing from the way they already understood it, which is that you have to pay for access, which is what you have to do in an offline world. You have to pay for access in an offline world. In an online world, you don't. You can publish your content. So I was thinking to myself, wow, we're going into a world of virtual conferences. And initially, as we were trying to figure out what a virtual conference was, people were making the same mistake. They were taking what they already know, which is an in-person event, and then stuffing it into a Zoom room. And it wasn't working so well. And I thought to myself, wow, this is interesting. It's not working for the same reason that marketing didn't work when people were stuffing what they already knew, which is buying ads, into the online world. And that's why we had so many banner ads in the beginning. And that's all people were doing rather than creating their own content. So I thought, wow, this is a really interesting opportunity because number one, I'm a professional speaker. I've done hundreds and hundreds of engagements in 46 countries at last count, all 7 continents. Wow. So I get the idea of speaking. And I know a bit about how things move when they go online. I also worked for many years in the financial information and financial news business for companies like Thomson Reuters and Dow Jones. And I understood how news and content gravitated online. So I thought, why not really dig into this topic? And so the bottom line was, as I researched and dug into it, and I've spoken at something like 35 or so virtual conferences since March, is that the biggest mistake people were making was reinterpreting what they already knew in an offline world, in an in-person event, and then trying to apply that to a virtual event, when the key was to reimagine what's possible, completely reimagine what's possible in the online world. And the people who did that were the ones that became successful. So what does that mean? It means don't necessarily, and there's a whole bunch of different ideas in the book as you read, but it means don't just follow the defaults in the platform you're using, whether it's Zoom or something else. And that's one of the reasons why I'm showing this particular image and background here, right? I've got a secondary computer I'm driving, which is over there.
Yes.
Driving the way that I do my presentations. And I've got a clicker here and I show images as I'm presenting. And this is a very different way of presenting than what most people do when they're on, say, a platform like Zoom, which is when the slides are really big, and the person speaking is a tiny little thumbnail. That's the default that those programs have, because that was the old webinar approach that I've been doing webinars now for probably 15 years. And initially it was just a talk track over slides. And then they added the ability to do video. It's a little kind of corner in the screen. Why not be big and bold like I am right now, and reimagining it and sticking, in my case, this screen over my shoulder? So lots of different aspects of that. Many of it including how can you use the different bits that are built into the platform, whether that's chat or Q&A or breakout rooms or other things to make it interesting. And a final point, just, and we could talk more about it if you'd like, but a final point is that that an in-person event is a theatrical experience, right? It's like a 3-act play. It's you're on a stage. A speaker is on a stage. They're delivering a talk. It has to be big and bold, delivering it to the back of the house. And I love that. I love it. Mm-hmm. But speaking in a little screen, like we're both doing right now, is different. It requires a different thinking. It's almost a television or a cinematic experience. So that means that you need to mix it up a little bit and perhaps include things like chats and videos and props and gestures and all sorts of other things to make it interesting, much like a television news program.
Yeah, I tell you, that point in your book, Standout Virtual Events, for me was really the biggest mind shift in that because I've done not as much as you, but I've done public speaking.
Yeah, no, I know you have. I've seen you on the circuit. Yeah.
And you think, oh, well, I'll just translate those skill sets over to this online world and it'll just be exactly the same. And
yeah,
I didn't know what the problem was. I knew I was having a problem. And when I got on your book, I was like, oh, it's Shakespeare theater versus, watching television and a big camera in front of you. And there is a different monologue, and there is a different way to talk. And like you said, be a little bit more expressive on the video, have the props, be conscious of these things. And that's when I started to really become more comfortable with the platform like I use, because it was like, okay, it is a different world, and I've got
a different world. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's exactly right. It's totally a different world.
The other thing that I found in your book, being a music fan, is we're both Greta Van Fleet fans.
Ah, yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I've only seen the band once, and it was last May at a festival, and it was early in the day, and I was super excited. I got there early, got up way up front. It was cool.
Yeah, I haven't seen them live. I've just watched a lot of their videos, but when I saw you mention that, I got excited because.
Thank you. I don't know about you. Oh my God, I miss live music. I've been to just over 800 live shows in my lifetime, including 75 Grateful Dead concerts, and I haven't been to a live show since March 1st, and I totally miss it.
Yeah, no, I love live music. I miss it too. I mean, here I live in Las Vegas, which is entertainment in the world.
Yeah, you can go out every night if you want.
I can go out every night, and just in watching that shut down, and that was one of the reasons why I moved here, because I love live music and I can go see it anytime I want. So now that we're about to enter 2021 here, in 31 days, where do you see marketing occurring in 2021, and when do you think we're going to get back to live events?
Well, first of all, live events can still be virtual.
Yeah.
A live event means that people watching are watching at the same time that the person is presenting. Mm-hmm. I like to use the term in-person event. Okay. I mean, I think when the vaccine starts to become readily available and we start to get people who are being vaccinated, and as well, if there's the possibility of very, very rapid testing that can be done easily and cheaply, not requiring being in a doctor's office, mm-hmm. That those are two things that will speed up the ability to begin to have in-person events. And I'm hopeful that it'll be in the summer of 2021. Okay. And I think, though, that we have learned so much about virtual events, all of us, over the past 6 months, that I think virtual events are here to stay. So I'm imagining a world in mid-2021 and beyond where in-person events are back. And I think that there's always going to be room for that, because we humans are social animals. We want to be together with other humans. And so there will still be room for that. And I believe very strongly that they're not going away. But I also think that because we've learned so much about how to use this little camera that we all now have, and people are skilled enough now, and companies have experimented enough now, that their good virtual events are here to stay. And I'm imagining a world where there's some hybrid events, where some people are participating online, some people are participating in person. But it's not just a feed of the live event delivered to the people who are watching online, but it's truly a hybrid where there's some things optimized for virtual, some things optimized for in-person. I can imagine that in a world going forward. And I'm thinking in particular about Tony Robbins. I speak at Tony Robbins Business Mastery events. And, normally, and I've been doing Business Mastery now since 2014, normally there's 2,500 people in a room a couple times a year, and a 5-day event. I have a 2-hour time slot. And it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. People are super excited about it. But in August, we went to a virtual event, and Tony just did a fabulous job of reimagining what's possible. He built a purpose-built studio near his home in Palm Beach with a 50-foot round, 20-foot high screen.
Wow!
So you're in the middle of this round screen. And when I was presenting, or when Tony presents, you can see 2,000 people at once on the screens. Each one is a small box, maybe the size of a computer screen, but each one is an individual person. You can see their name. You can see them in their virtual setting, whether it's at home or their office. And it was a fabulous, fabulous experience for everyone who was involved. I could imagine combining those somehow into a hybrid sort of event, and perhaps that will happen.
Yeah, I definitely could see that happening. I think even when you come out with a vaccine and quick testing, there's going to be a certain segment of the population that's still going to want to have the social distancing because of age or concern or whatever. And I think that hybrid will definitely be in the future. One of the things that I was interested in, I work with doctors and coaches and authors, as you do.
Yep.
There's the live, in-person event where they are able to network and monetize. How has that monetization model, now that everything's online or through virtual, how have they managed to somehow still monetize their time and their brand?
I think that there's lots of different really interesting models for how organizations have been able to still make money or generate leads from their virtual events. And sometimes it just requires rethinking how you price and what offerings you have. And there's been some really interesting things that I've seen. For example, I'm a big believer in the power of a live virtual event, meaning everyone is participating at the same time. And I actually recommend to some organizations, just don't even do a replay. Don't permit a replay, because you want everyone to be there live. You want to have the live interactive components, whether it's participating in chat or participating on social media using a hashtag in real time, or the live Q&A, and breakout rooms are another possibility. But the idea of being there at that moment is super important. It's the same as watching a live sporting event versus watching it, 2 days or 6 months later. It's just a different kind of experience. So I've actually worked with some organizations, and I've shared this idea of try to make it live, where they've actually made the ticket to the live event cheaper than a ticket to the replay. And I love that. I mean, what a cool way, because most people do the opposite. They say, if you want to come in and watch this live, it's whatever, $500 for a ticket. But if you want to watch the replay starting next week, it's only $250. No, flip it. $500 to watch live and $1,000 to watch the replay.
Yeah. I mean,
It's really interesting. You know what you can do with the business model to encourage people to do what you want.
That's actually brilliant. It forces them to go, oh yeah, what if we have a replay? You're just going to pay 4 times more money. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, then
Oh, sure, we have a replay. Yeah.
yeah, but I'll make it live this time. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And that's just one example. But another thing that's super cool is I encourage organizations to make it shorter, 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 shorter. A typical in-person event, 2 or 3 days, a dozen speakers, each speaker gets a 1-hour speaking slot. That's sort of a typical kind of in-person event. What a lot of people thought they could pull off when they went virtual is the similar amount of time. A dozen speakers over 3 days, each speaker is speaking for an hour. It just doesn't work as well. And so shorten, 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 shorten. One organization I worked with, Skillsoft, I wrote about them in the book. They did a 24-hour Follow the Sun virtual event where it started at 9 a.m. Sydney time, Australia time, and then went from Australia through Asia, through Europe, and then through North America, and it ended at 5 o'clock Boston time. They're a Boston area-based company. And it worked really well because some of the content, most of the content was live, but some of it was recorded and then was played over the 3 different time zones. And it just felt like it was super quick, and it didn't drag on for multiple days. Another organization called Scaling Up, which is run by my buddy Vern Harnish, I've spoken at a number of his in-person events. Normally he does 2 days, 12 speakers, an hour each, and 6 hours per day, 6 hours, 6 speakers each day. And so what Vern decided to do was completely shorten it to only a 2-hour event. Each of the 12 speakers only had 10 minutes, and I had 10 minutes. I spoke just before Mark Cuban. He also had 10 minutes. And it was really interesting. We got great feedback. Something like 3,000 people attended the first time he did that format. They paid over $100 each for tickets. I mean, it worked out really, really well because he targets CEOs. And the CEO said, wow, only 2 hours and I can hear all these really cool, great A-list speakers. I'm in, and they bought a ticket. So, thinking about it from a completely different perspective on the business model side opens up all kinds of different possibilities.
Yeah, that's great. Have you mentioned Tony Robbins and this other brand that did the Follow the Sun. Have you seen some examples of some people that have really innovated, gravitated towards this, and done a phenomenal job? Can you give us maybe 1 or 2 other examples that you've seen?
Yeah, so I mean, those are some of the examples that I've seen that are really interesting. I really like also the idea of throwing in interesting surprises and extras. A live musical guest, for example. And you and I both love music. I spoke in an event where we had a surprise musical guest pop in. They're called Black Violin. It's a super cool, interesting mashup of hip hop and classical violin, and I loved it. I loved the music, and I was really lucky because the members, Will and Kev, are the 2 violinists, were based in their studio in Florida. And they played one song virtually, of course, and the participants were able to see that one song. But then I popped in and did a live interview with them for a very short period of time, only like 8 minutes or something like that. And then they played 2 more songs. There's less than half an hour altogether, and it was a really fun little musical interlude. I've seen yoga in between sessions where you're sitting down at your home watching a session for half an hour, and then there's a 5-minute simple yoga stretch getting you prepared for the next half an hour session. So I love those little surprise extras that people are putting in.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant because you're inert, and now all of a sudden you're doing yoga exercises before the next speaker. It not only mixes it up intellectually, it also just mixes it up physically.
Gets your blood flowing, right?
Gets the blood flowing, gets the brain going.
Absolutely right. It's super cool.
Yeah, brilliant. Fanocracy, the other book that I finished here. Speak to that. The timing of this book for me personally was almost karma for me, because I got into this thing of over the summer when everything shut down, like word of mouth marketing. There's something to word of mouth marketing. There's almost an opportunity here to rediscover that. And I was looking online, got the book, read it. Can you speak to us about what inspired? I know that you wrote this with your daughter. She's a doctor. I found that very interesting since I serve doctors. Tell me the backdrop of how you came up with that book.
Yeah, sure. So obviously we researched and wrote it pre-pandemic, but about 5 years ago, Reiko and I were driving in the car, and I was talking about a couple of things that were on my mind. Number one, I was starting to feel like the social networks were becoming too polarized, and the algorithms that the social networks are using are kind of had gone from being a force for good, and I was a big cheerleader around in the early days, to being something that was pushing people into these buckets of polarization and conspiracy theories and so on. So I was kind of getting frustrated with the social networks. But at the same time, I was saying to my daughter, Reiko, I mean, think about what the things I love. I love them so much, especially live music. And I said to her, isn't it ridiculous that I've seen the Grateful Dead 75 times? I mean, what's up with that? And she said, well, I've gone deep into Harry Potter, and I knew that. But she said, I've watched every movie multiple times, read every book multiple times. She went to the Wizarding World of Harry Potter theme park several times. She even wrote an 85,000 word alternative ending to the Harry Potter series, where Draco Malfoy is a spy for the Order of the Phoenix, and put that on a fan fiction site that's been downloaded thousands of times and commented on hundreds of times. So we both recognized that we're massive, massive fans of the things we love. And I thought, well, I think there's something there, Reiko. I mean, I started to really dig into this idea of fandom. It just interests me so much. And I started to talk with hundreds of people and companies about what they're a fan of and why, companies about how they've been able to develop fans of their products and their services and their ideas. And I said to her, I think there's a book here. And I started to ask her a whole bunch of questions, thinking I was going to write it myself. And then I wrote. I ended up going to my daughter loves Comic-Con too, and she gets dressed up every year and as characters that she loves. And I went to a Comic-Con and I wrote a little essay about it. And she said, "Daddy, this is terrible." And we have a good relationship. She can easily say that to me. And I said, "Well, would you help me write this?" And then that turned into this idea that we would actually be co-authors in this book, which is what we did. So we spent 5 years researching and writing, and it's great because, she's my daughter, so we're clearly different generations. She's a millennial woman. My wife's Japanese race, so Reiko is mixed race. She, throughout the time that we were writing and researching, she was going to medical school, and she graduated about 6 months ago, and is now in the emergency department at Boston Medical Center, which is the safety net hospital here in the Boston area. Okay. Practicing emergency medicine at the time of a pandemic, what a way to start your medical career, right? Wow. But because of her background is so different, she did an undergraduate degree in neuroscience. We really dug into the neuroscience aspect of fandom, what's going on in our brains when we become a fan of something. And what we learned as we were doing the research, talking to neuroscientists, speaking with companies about how they've grown fans or people for why they become fans, what we learned is that every single human is hardwired to want to be a fan of something, because we want to be a part of a tribe of like-minded people. And when we're a part of a tribe of like-minded people, we feel safe and secure and comfortable. Most of the time, that's a force for good. It's like me and my 75 Grateful Dead concerts. It can be a force for bad if the social networks algorithms are forcing you into some polarizing rat hole of conspiracy theories. But for the most part, it's a force of good. And if an organization knows about how that neuroscience works, they can develop ways to build fans, and it works in a really interesting way.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and I love that backstory of what inspired it. The fact that you and your daughter took different perspectives, not only in terms of what you're fans of, but also generational.
Yeah.
How you view the world, and so you've got that mix. I think one of the things that I really got from this was the story that I loved the most, that I think brought it down to like a business. How could a business use it? Because I'm always trying to bring things down to a pragmatism.
Yeah.
Is that insurance company?
Yeah.
That had the car club. If you could speak to that.
Sure.
I don't want to take the story away from you. I found that utterly fascinating, and that really kind of gave me some aha moments of how to apply the book to business.
Yeah, me too. It's my favorite story in the book, because a lot of times people say to us, but David or Reiko, I can't build fans in my business because, and then there's an excuse, right? We're a
Right.
B2B company. We're a software company.
Right.
I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm a dentist. We can't build fans. And there's a couple of examples that I love to share for people who say that to me. And Hagerty Insurance is one of them. So Hagerty Insurance does classic car auto insurance. And almost everyone on the planet hates car insurance, right? You hate to buy it because you spend money on something that it just feels like the money goes down a black hole. And furthermore, we never want to use it because it means we've crashed our car. So, it's a product that's no fun. So I was speaking with McKeel Hagerty, who's the entrepreneurial CEO of Hagerty Insurance. He founded the company and has been running it. And he said, David, people hate insurance. So I had to figure out a different way to market it, because I couldn't do what all the other insurance companies are doing, which is either try to be the low-cost provider or try to out-advertise the other guy. And so what he told me that he did was he just set out to build fans. And so pre-pandemic, of course, there were hundreds of car shows, classic car auto shows around the country that he would go to and his team would go to. And they would be part of that culture. They would be part of that tribe of people who love classic cars. And they became seen as part of the group, as opposed to being just a company trying to sell stuff. They created the Hagerty Drivers Club, which when I last checked had 650,000 members. I'm a member, by the way. I own a 1973 Land Rover Series 3 that's been insured by Hagerty for more than 15 years. And they have a YouTube channel with over 1 million subscribers. And McKeel Hagerty said to me, David, I've got millions of fans, and that's what's grown my business. They're now the largest classic car auto insurance company in the world. Will grow by double digits again this year, which they've done every single year. They're probably going to add 200,000 new customers this year. So super interesting example. As you said, it's one of my favorite examples too that we wrote about in the book, because anybody, if you're an insurance company, even anybody can build fans.
Yeah, I think that's, when you talk to a business person about marketing, they don't think of fans, they think of transactions.
Correct.
And you have to get a business to come out of that transactional mindset and to go, we're actually going to make people love you. It's like, but how does that monetize? And you're like, dude, the money will come. Yeah. But you've got to think a little bit more, I don't know what the word creatively or whatever it is, you've got to think in terms of building a fan base. And I think that's what the book does so well, is kind of get people to shift their view on it.
Yeah, and I think you've really nailed one of the important points there, which is that that people really begin to love a company that they work with. And what's interesting to us and to me is that when people do love a company, like Hagerty as a good example, Even if another company comes along at a lower price, people aren't going to necessarily switch. If somebody came to me and said, we're also a classic car auto insurance company, and we will insure your Land Rover at 10% cheaper or 20% cheaper than Hagerty charges, I would say thanks, but no thanks. I want to stick with Hagerty.
Yeah.
I'm a fan.
Right.
And I think a lot of people think the same way. And again, there's the neuroscience aspect of it. I want to share a very specific idea around the neuroscience of fandom.
Please do.
This idea of being a part of a tribe is literally hardwired into our brains. It's a survival technique, because when you're with your tribe, you're safe and secure and comfortable. It goes back tens of thousands of years with humans. We're wandering the plains or the woods, and when we're with our tribe, that's when we're safe. If we're on our own or we encounter another tribe, that's when we're vulnerable. And that's why I love being at a Grateful Dead concerts, and that's why people love Hagerty and the other companies we talked about. But one neuroscience named Edward T. Hall actually identified what he calls the different levels of proximity, of where people are in proximity of other human beings. Now, this is research, of course, clearly was done pre-pandemic, but what he identified is that further than 12 feet away, he called public space. And our human brains know that people are in our public space 12 feet or more away from us, but we don't actively track them. However, when someone gets within 12 feet of us, between 12 feet and 4 feet, which he called social space, hence the concept of social distance during the pandemic, that space is when our brains begin to track those people. So again, prior to the pandemic, if you were to walk into a crowded cocktail party, your brain immediately begins to scan people. You don't even know you're doing it. You're scanning the people in the room, looking for friends, looking for enemies. It's an ancient survival technique.
Totally.
And then people who are closer than 4 feet from you, which is sort of cocktail party distance when you're sharing a glass of wine in a crowded party, that's where the most powerful human connections happen. So if it's a positive encounter, people who are part of your tribe, classic car lovers at the auto show, or people at a Grateful Dead concert, or people at Comic-Con who love Harry Potter, really positive human engagements. However, if you're in a crowded elevator or a crowded subway car, you don't know those people, it can be a negative feeling. Now, yes, we're in a pandemic. So what does this mean for us now? And possibly, what does this mean for doing a virtual event or doing a talk like we're doing right now? Well, there's another form of neuroscience, which is really interesting, called mirror neurons. Mirror neurons are the part of our brains that fire when we see somebody doing something as if we do it ourselves, as if we're doing it ourselves, which I'll demonstrate with this lemon and a slice of lemon. So if I take a bite of this lemon, Edwin, my brain is firing and my eyes close and actually watering a little bit. My mouth puckers up. I can feel the lemon on my lips and on my tongue, and my saliva glands are running. And I mean, it's powerful to bite into a lemon. My brain is firing, but yours is too, right, Edwin?
Oh, absolutely.
Feeling that lemon.
Water right when he did it.
It's crazy. And that's the power of mirror neurons. Now, here's why this is so important during the pandemic, for what we're doing right now, creating this content, this video, and for things like virtual events, but also for how you organize your website and how you do your social media, is doing a video like this, cropped as if I'm 4 feet away from you. Now, the camera I'm talking to is actually closer than 4 feet, but I've optimized it to make it appear to you, Edwin, and to the viewers, as if I'm 4 feet away from them. And then our brains are actually processing that as if we're in the same room. Intellectually, you're not in the same room with me. You of course understand that. I'm hundreds or even thousands of miles away. I'm outside of Boston. Right. But your brain tells you you're in the same room. Now, that becomes really interesting to build fans. And explains why we feel we know a movie star or a television star, even though we intellectually know we've never met them, because of the power of mirror neurons. So camera position. Have the camera about at your eye level, which I have exactly, I've measured. My camera is right now exactly at my eye level. I prefer to stand when I speak. Looking directly at the camera. I mean, a lot of people when they're presenting are looking down at the other person they're talking with. And to the viewer, you're not looking at the camera. You got to force yourself to look directly at that camera. Proper lighting is important. A proper microphone is important. But the mirror neuron aspect is the critical part that a lot of people don't get right. Talking directly to the camera about camera position as if you're 4 feet away from those that are watching. Super, super powerful way to build fans through a couple of different aspects of neuroscience.
That's amazing research. I find that very fascinating. And I think that it's very important because I think the biggest mistake I see, particularly with newer content creators that, God bless them, they're getting on, they're trying to do it.
No, it's great. Yeah.
But the camera's way below and you're looking up their nose and the whole presentation's like this versus you would never have a conversation with somebody looking down at you. That's not even a conversation. It's almost like you're being chided.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Exactly right. So, tons of super interesting aspects of the neuroscience around fandom. And I'm just lucky my daughter, Reiko, did a neuroscience degree at Columbia prior to med school. And she dug into that aspect of it, which fascinated me as well. But there's so many ways to build fans. And, one of the things that was most fascinating to us and most surprising to us was the importance of passion. And what we learned is that passion is infectious. When someone has passion for what they do, that passion becomes infectious and is a great way to build fans. And I know that you talk with doctors often. Reiko, of course, is a doctor, but we ran across a dentist whose name is Dr. John Marashi, and he's a dentist in Southern California. And he just lives this idea of passion. He's built fans as a result, and I'll give you the punchline ahead of time. He's grown his business by 30% based on a simple idea that we outlined. And here's that idea. Passion is infectious. I was speaking at a Tony Robbins event. I was talking about this idea of building fans, and Dr. Marashi approached. This was a live, an in-person event. Dr. Marashi approached me afterwards and said, David, I can't build fans. I'm a dentist. All dentists are the same. We all have the same website. Us in our white coats and dirty teeth turning into clean teeth. And then I said, well, Dr. Marashi, what do you love to do? And he says, I love to skateboard. I'm a huge fan of skateboarding.
Wow.
And so I said, well, why don't you share your love of skateboarding in your dental practice?
Interesting.
And he thought about it for a minute and walked away. And I didn't see him then after that. But about a year later, he contacted me and said, David, I just want to let you know that this idea has been transformational for my business. So what Dr. Marashi did was he put skateboards on the wall of his dental practice. He then started to skateboard from one examination room to another. He put pictures of him skateboarding on his website. And he created an Instagram feed. Last time I checked, it had over 15,000 followers on his Instagram, where he has not only dentistry related stuff, but photos and videos of him skateboarding. And he said, David, I've been able to measure, because I ask my new patients how they heard of me. And I've been able to measure that 30% of my new patients and 23% of my new revenue in the past year can be directly tied to the simple idea of me showing what I'm passionate about, skateboarding. And he says it's not other skateboarders. It's just people who are attracted to his passion and his love for skateboarding. So all of us, if we're passionate about what we do, if we're passionate about the things we love, have the opportunity to attract people to us and build fans as a result.
I think that's such a great point, David, and thank you for that example. That is such a, back to my pragmatism. I mean, it's passion, but I think what attracted people, like whether they like skateboards or not, they found that the man himself had character and personality and passion.
Yeah.
And that just attracted them. Like, I don't know, I just like the guy.
Yeah, no, I know, right? And I don't skateboard, but I love the idea. And he specifically said, David, now there are still 10,000 dentists in Southern California, but there's 9,999 of them. And then me, who's the skateboarding dentist. I've completely transformed myself. And I talked with Reiko about this idea. And she said that one of the things that she has found in her role as an emergency doctor at Boston Medical Center is they're frequently head to toe in PPE, right? They have a big old mask and something over their head, and the gown, the scrubs that they have, or whatever they call the outfit that they've got on. So they have pretty much nothing personal on them at all. And the only thing that the patient can see is pretty much their eyes. And they have gloves on, the whole thing, because they treat emergency patients as if they have COVID, even until they know for sure they don't. But what she said was she'll wear a Boston Red Sox mask. Or she'll wear a rainbow pin, or a Black Lives Matter pin, and immediately has an instant bond with the patient. And she'll see the patient will come in super scared because oh my God, they're in the emergency room. And then the doctor shows up with a Red Sox mask on, or a Boston Bruins mask on, and they immediately relax because all of a sudden there's something that they can relate to. And so I think we all need to be thinking about how we can show what we're passionate about.
That's awesome. Well, I love motorcycles, as you can tell by my posters in the background, and I love live music, and I'm looking forward to come back. I want to be respectful of your time, David, and I want to thank you so much for taking your time, for being here on Growth Driven. It's a brand new show for me, and having somebody of your caliber and recognition, I'm telling you, it means a lot to me. And I'm passionate about creating content, and having you here has been a blessing. I can't send enough thank yous your way. Hopefully, I'm sure there's probably more books in you to be had. And when they come out, I would love to have you back and talk about.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to come back, and I want to thank you again for finding my work way back in 2007 and engaging with me and sharing my ideas over all those years. I really, really appreciate it, Edwin. And I'm sure we will connect again, and hopefully I'll be on the show again soon.
Absolutely. With that, thank you again. If you're here on Growth Driven, I've been with David Meerman Scott. Absolutely go to his website, davidmeermanscott.com. Get his books, read them like I have. I've gained so much, and I know you will too. Peace out and be well.